Are you fed up with printing exercise programs? Or horror, drawing them? Solve every exercise prescription issue you can think of using Rehab My Patient. Thousands of pictures and videos of every movement you can dream up. Send by email or WhatsApp, translate into different languages at the click of a button. Don't take our word for it. Sign up for a 3-month free trial now. Just go to rehabmypatient.com/physiomatters.
Stuart Patterson, welcome to Chewing It Over. Now, it's been a hell of a long and winding road for you in this industry and in your career. But I want you to just tell me where you found physiotherapy and MSK when you first connected with it.
Jack, first of all, thanks very much for having us on. Mate, it's great to be here. Where physiotherapy first found me, I think it was when I was 15 years old. I was all set to do some work experience in a bank. I think the day before I was going to start on a Monday, I broke my leg playing rugby. So instead of going to the bank, I ended up finding my way to a physiotherapy clinic. And yeah, it was a bit of a light glide moment. It was seeing a career that involved people, that involved physical activity. And at the end of the day, you can earn a salary doing it. It just was in my sweet spot. And so from that moment, I was, I have been and still in love with physiotherapy.
Brilliant. And was it always then partly via the sport and by that being a sort of MSK clinic that then MSK was always the thing that you gravitated towards? Or did you end up having it in its fullest form in sort of medicine or neuro or ever any other directions?
So I think it was definitely MSK, and the whole sport thing was at the forefront of where I thought I wanted to go in those early days, and certainly did my undergraduate training in Sydney, Australia. That the hope was to go out and become the Wallabies team physiotherapist. Reality was a bit different. So I certainly went down that elite sport avenue, both in Australia and when I came to the UK. Back in '99, the original goal was to be an elite sport physio, and so definitely gravitated towards that. But as things happen, life changes, and my path ended up being a different one to going down the elite sport route.
That's interesting, because that is often people's stories go that way, but they never really lose touch with some of the aspirations to the care that they wanted to deliver, which I think is, from what I understand, part of your story from sidebar conversations we've had over time and knowing a bit about your background. I've been keen to have you on for a while, and it was always wondering as to when the right timing was. And sometimes it's not necessary, but it can be just a prime mover to get us together, is that it's an inflection point in your career in lots of ways, as you've just resigned from the board of Vita Group, as it's gone through another merger acquisition, and that has been an incredible story. So I wonder if I don't know where to start with that in some ways, because it's so inherent to you, but people sometimes don't know. They know of the companies and brands, and they've even worked for them. They don't always know the founder's story. And in your case, it's incredibly relevant to those of us that are in clinical practice or have young businesses to know that, to understand its origin story. So can you, if you can, wherever you fancy starting, tell us a little bit about the journey?
So, mate, chronologically, if I so arrived here, around about 25 years ago, with the hope of getting involved in elite sport, and that's how it worked out. I did a couple of years in the early 2000s with a professional basketball team called London Towers, and that was from one aspect was great. We were doing sort of travel and part of a team, and we're involved in a couple of European competitions and seeing new places and that sort of thing. And it was great for a period of time, but it was, it was long hours. It was being away from home. I started to I was getting older, where I was getting into a relationship, and family were coming on the way, where that sort of lifestyle wasn't conducive to where I wanted to go. So it was, I fell into a business partnership with a New Zealand physio called Bevan Ellis, and we were down in South London at a practice, Crystal Palace Sports Physio Centre. It had already been there. It had been established by Sport England, but Sport England were moving away. Bevan and I came in and basically started trying to initially just getting the elite sport component of that up and running again. Right. But we just found ourselves looking for, doing the elite sport wasn't sustainable with a work-life balance with family life. So we actively thought, right, how do we actually move away from what we thought, the path we were going? How do we actively move away from where we were going? We started off trying to grow the private physiotherapy side of the business, enough where we could start getting other physiotherapists in to help and employing them, and him and I pulling back from the plinth, and sort of went from going 5 days clinical to 4 days to 3 days to 2 days to not at all, and being full-time managers.
How quickly was that part of the process? Because that's always interesting to people, as they naturally can see how they might withdraw towards management, but people, sometimes it happens quite quickly, sometimes a bit more slowly. What was it for you?
I make it sound like it happened quickly, but no, it was. Just that process was 5 or 6 years of getting busy enough where we could pull back clinically. We fell into a couple of occupational health contracts, providing physiotherapists on site to fire brigades and police forces, and again that just helped grow the business. And I think it was in about 2006 that a chance meeting with a local GP who said, look, we've got a waiting list for physiotherapy. Do you mind helping out? And we started receiving NHS referrals. So that became the third leg of the business, private occupational physio and NHS physio. That went from being our latest sort of strand to being our most busy part of work. And that's how we started getting into doing NHS contracts.
And was that still under? Was that all still under Crystal Palace at that point?
Yeah. So at the time the brand was Crystal Palace Physio Group, CPPG.
Yeah.
And I guess we went from initially being a small organisation, from 2 to 10 to 20. We got up around the 50 mark, and then the NHS contract started coming in, and that's when we got to around about 150 staff. Right. And by this stage, we were fully fledged managers. We were converted clinicians, and by this stage, I guess we're looking about 2015. By this stage,
but are you still quite regionally specific?
Very regional, very London and southeast based. Doing regional NHS MSK contracts, doing mostly regional occupational physio contracts, on-site physios, workplace assessments, and doing private physio from 6 or 7 clinics.
And so, if we could just take it to the peak of that iteration, then yes. in terms of size, what are the three? What are the percentages or the ratios within those three categories at that point?
So we got to the point where the NHS went from being the smallest to the largest. So it was about 50% of what we did. The private stuff was about 30%, and the occupational health was about 20%.
Brilliant. And were you able to combine venues to those things, or did they end up having their own sort of specialised centres? How did you work it?
Good question. So yes, we did. We were combining our NHS and private businesses, and people would always say, look, that's not going to work. How can you be having one type of client who's not paying for their service and someone else who's paying for it privately? But look, it worked. It was a matter of, rightly or wrongly, a privately paying patient could be seen within 24 hours. And with the NHS, it was just a little bit longer. So there was a I guess a paying for that premium of getting seen a bit earlier. but they received essentially the same service.
And were there any challenges with that you needed to mitigate, like on a personal level, on a management level, and then on a wider set of policy come political level? Was it something that almost sounds more complex than it is, or were there things that needed to be ironed out?
There were things that needed to be ironed out. It was funny. I mean, that was. That was I guess in the early 2000s that we started that. From 2006 onwards, it felt like there was greater factions in physiotherapy profession back then.
Right.
There was quite a from my perception, NHS is good, private is bad.
Right.
Coming from my background in Australia, it never really felt like that. It was all about whether it was a good service or not who was paying for it. Okay. But yeah, like there definitely was. There was some of our staff almost had a bit of ideological difficulty in seeing both. I would say within the profession, would sometimes cop a bit of flack, saying how can you be seeing NHS patients and feeling a little bit that somehow was doing something wrong. I would say things are better now, and I think there's more of an acceptance around public-private partnerships. But that was something, I definitely noticed from some staff and from external that there was a little bit, how do you square doing both? But for me, it wasn't about ideological differences. It was about, let's provide a good service, and that's the main thing. There's good and bad providers on either side of the public-private.
Yeah, I think that is really interesting, and I don't think it's a coincidence, is it, that you were able to reconcile that personally and ethically because of the cultural. You were like, no, I come from somewhere that has an obvious mixed economy, but it's not in health, and it's not, but it's not as tribal, let's say. And so you were able to then, and this is the thing when I hear of, as I came through, I'm then late 2000s. I'm into uni, and I qualified then into the early 2010s. And so around that time, I'm hearing about you guys as a proof of concept in that direction, that then it's a proof that not only can it be done, it can be done well. There's enough geography between us for me to not know the details, but generally speaking, that was a really interesting model, and something that Connect and others were doing around a similar sort of time, under what was then any willing provider became any qualified provider, and there started to be a more robust network in which that could be done, and that those services could be better merged. And so, I'm glad to hear that you feel that it's less tribal in that direction. Still some work to be done, and people have their preferences, but as a general rule, the access for patients, and that we can't be too sort of navel gazy about this. We can all have our own feelings about it, but who's going to get them better is a really interesting question. So I kind of cut us off a little bit as we were going down the timeline. So that's then CPPG at its peak, let's say. It comes to what sort of time frame, and then what happens next?
I guess CPPG had got to a point where it had these three different types of clients, I think we're around about 2015 now, about 150 staff, going great guns, really good culture, works like going to friends going to work with your friends. Right. And then my business partner had decided it was time for him to return to New Zealand. So that was a bit of a shock, but we had a great partnership, and we managed to navigate through that, where I did it. So basically, I did it by myself for a couple of years, and it was good to experience leading an organisation for several years by myself, what that felt like. But I guess I got to a stage where I'd done most of the stuff I wanted to do. I'd got the business as far as I could get it. I felt if we were going to grow more, we probably needed a bigger team and some more help. I got talking to a gentleman by the name of Derek Farrell, who was the CEO of Rehab Works at the time, who were a competitor. He said, we could do some good things if we joined forces. I originally said no way, that's not for me. But I sort of thought about a whole lot of things. I thought, the vision was we could be a leading provider of not just physical health but mental health as well. And I could see that was trending towards being a big need. So
talk me through that instinct. I don't want to make sure we don't breeze past that, because I think many could, including myself, can really recognize that. Oh, no way! I've had some of those letters, and sometimes people not realizing the distinctions between my clinical business and my education business.
Yeah,
because so sometimes they it's a quick thing that they don't want to follow up on if they knew the truth. Really, I'm not really worth pursuing in that direction. But I know that when they do come through, I have a similar sort of feeling, like it's the protection, and I just wondered, have you reflected on some of those emotions, and how did you then overcome them, if that was indeed your first instinct?
So yeah, you're right, Jack. That these approaches come through, and it's a bit like feeling, do you want to give away your child? And it is, and for many years that wasn't the case, and talking about my sort of journey has been from a small startup to a medium-sized business to what sort of became, I guess, of an enterprise corporate size. There's fours and against along the continuum. And one of the good things of when it's a startup or a small group, or when it's completely yours, a good thing is everyone. It's like hanging out with family. You've got complete control, and having that autonomy is great. The downside is, everything is on your shoulders. Everyone looks to you to solve everything. And for a stage in my life, I didn't mind that burden, but I was getting on, and I just sort of thought, actually, I could do with some help here. So it was, and it depends on what stage of your life you are, and what your circumstances are, and whether you feel you've got a full tank of motivation, of petrol in the tank. I could feel my tank, starting to run on empty. Right. And so a combination of factors meant that, I'd brought the business so far. If it was going to fulfill its potential, I need, if I wanted to go from the championship up to the premiership, I needed to bring in premiership players, Gotcha. and so that was part of the thinking, and so we joined forces with Rehab Works. We rebranded to Vita Health Group. We still had these three strands: NHS, occupational health, and private. But we weren't just doing it across physiotherapy, physical health. We were doing it across with mental health as well. Yeah.
And this is around 2015, then we're saying.
Yeah. So we're getting on to about 2018 now.
But yeah, sorry, 2015. Then you did it yourself, didn't you? Sorry, that was the gap.
Gotcha. And then joined forces with Rehab Works early 2018. And that was where I guess the growth really accelerated. So it wasn't just me. There was a group of very, very talented people, a senior leadership team, who rather than writing bids myself, or you can afford to get in a bid writer and bid writing teams. You can have people looking out on the horizon, seeing what's happening. You can have a governance team. You can have an IT team, and it just gives that infrastructure where it allowed growth to accelerate, and we ended up going from what was a medium-sized physio business to actually a much bigger enterprise type business.
You know, when I speak to, like, even over dinner with mentors of mine over the years, or when I've listened to various different podcasts, even outside of industry, but within our industry, the simultaneous emotions of the relief of being able to delegate to real experts into spaces like governance or bid writing and things like that.
Yeah.
Coupled with the need, almost redundancy that some people describe. Now, I don't want to put words in your mouth. You might not recognize that, but some have described that. And then it's sort of an identity challenge, especially over the independence and the agility that you had before it.
Yeah.
As I said, I don't want to just dump all of that on you, but if you could just reflect on that moment and how, again, you might have come through it if you did.
So that good question. That was why I took so long to come to a decision, because it is a big decision, and you're right, Jack. That if you're you've been a startup and you're a business owner and you've seen and grown and cradled that baby. I had cradled a business for a long time. It's not separate to you; it's part of you. And so letting go of that is very difficult and fraught with risk. And I read a statistic that 80% of business owners who exit, who basically let go of the baby, regret the decision, and have that what you said, that identity crisis where identity is lost, purpose is lost, and so I was very cognizant of that. I didn't want that happen to me. So in terms of when joining forces with RehabWorks, I still had a role. So I was deputy CEO, and like you said, the good thing was it was an unburdening for me. Whereas I was a jack of all trades, running around spinning the HR and the governance and the bidding and the plates. There were more grown-ups in the room to help with those. And I could concentrate on the bits that I liked and I was good at, and the bits that I enjoyed were the people bit, and pulling people together around a common purpose, and building a culture. I was able to focus more on the bits that I enjoyed, and I was able to let go of some of the hard bits, bits that I didn't enjoy as much. And so for me, overall it was liberating. It was a change, but it was, overall it was net positive. But I understand that's not for everyone.
I just wondered if we could just touch base on the scale for a second again. So at this point, what size in terms of how many staff, and what size at this point in terms of turnover? So
around about 2018, I guess, total staff was around about 400 full-timers. And we had a couple of tough years to actually get the rocket ship to launch. But we the pandemic was, in a way, on the one side it was very difficult for the physiotherapy side of the business. We were closing clinics and having a hard time there, but there was an increasing need for mental health and online talking therapies. We started winning contracts in the NHS space there of IAP services, or talking therapy services. Once we started to get a bit of momentum in that space, and we went from 400 to 500 to around about 1,000, and then more recently we're around about that 2,000 FTE headcount, with an approximate turnover of just north of 100 million.
Brilliant. And what was the peak? Because that was a question I forgot to ask. What was the prior to your merger, your original merger? What was sort of peak turnover at that point? Because I think one of the things, reason I asked the specifics on this is because I think sometimes people's nervousness over some of that is trying to comprehend their own slice of a larger pie being bigger than the pie they currently hold, right? And they struggle with that arithmetic because it's hard for them to scale. So that's why I just wondered, what was the sort of peak pre-merger as to where you were at with CPPG?
So my pre-merger, it was a headcount of around about 150 with a turnover of about 7 million. Yeah. And maybe there is a bit of an inflection point around that 150, because I don't know whether you've read some sort of military studies, but you get on a control about you only can know or 150 people, and then after that you've got to start dividing it up into regiments and that sort of thing.
That's right. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, it's like there's loads of different social theories around why, isn't there? But yeah, that was interesting that was your experience as well.
And so yeah, you're in answer to your question, you know, at that point you've got you're an ownership of the whole pie, but you know the growth trajectory is starting to flatten out and starting to plateau. Yeah. So do you keep doing that? And you know, a lot of people do, and that's good, and they're happy for it to continue on as a lifestyle business, and that works for what people want to do, and that's one option. But I guess I was keen to see how far I could grow. I was curious around what that next chapter would look like. And yeah, it does mean having a smaller piece of that pie, but hopefully you're going to have the expertise and infrastructure that you know you can grow and reach more people than you ever would have if you continued on the same path. So for me, it was the potential to grow faster, but also, you know, we're selling and providing good stuff here in terms of physiotherapy and mental health, and yeah, if you can grow your footprint and grow your impact and you know, increase the number of people that you're making a difference to their lives, then mate, that's part of it too, just having a greater impact.
Definitely. Well, it's definitely one of the things that I've said a number of times on this show is that those that are entrepreneurs that have got a penchant for services and systems that also happen to be healthcare providers do not then double down in health for coins. It don't make any sense. There's lots of different sectors of which could get growth and certainly money in a quicker way. So those that stick around in it, in my observation, I haven't found an anomaly to this, are the ones that are bothered about that service. And so when you're going through that process, I think one of the things that is interesting for me, and hopefully as well for the listeners, is did there then become a point in which you had to trade off against something like not just a semblance of control, which is obvious, but a sense of, did the quality have to compromise for the efficiency? Was there something that needed to trade off against that? In an ideal world, in utopia, that original model would have just scaled without challenge, and therefore it could have been still close to the clinical product. Or is it that it goes through a phase and can actually be found again? But what I wonder is am I speaking about a cliche that actually isn't fair, or is it something that does genuinely need to be grappled with, and that there are mitigating strategies you could advise us on?
You're right. There is a bit of a lot coupled with growth. There are some compromises, and one is that, you know, when you go for a startup or a small number of clinics, you know, you can have a bit of variation, and there isn't the need for systems and sort of, you know, protocols. But there is, you know, rightly or wrongly, some commodification that comes when you get bigger, and rather than letting people have free rein, we've got to say, look, this is the way we've got to do it. You know, you can't go off, and so it does become commoditized. And you know, getting back to the NHS private conundrum of having sort of you know, two different types of client coming to the same clinic, there were compromises, and whereas a private client you could see more regularly because they were paying for it and they were seeing benefit and they were happy to have a certain number of treatments. You know, on the NHS, the pot was only of a sufficient size And so that meant that compromises had to be made. And so we had a certain period of time that the client was paying for, and we're saying the bigger client here was the UK government. That basically we had to fit within that remit, and we could still make a difference, and we could still get that person on the right path. But it isn't, but it was a compromise. Could we have done with more time? Absolutely. But this was the client that we were dealing with. So there's definitely compromises that you make on the way, and there is a bit of commoditizing, but again, that's part of what you try and do culture-wise, in that you can still, as you get bigger, that doesn't mean that the personal care and the looking after the patient, that doesn't have to, you still, the level of care you still give patients that high level of personalized care that despite being big.
Because I think that's one of the things that people are fearful of, isn't it? That the patient will become very much a statistic, but even the staff member becomes a statistic because of and inevitably, in terms of how many first names can you remember and how many people's families or name of their dog can you remember, compared to, there's no way that your first 10 staff, you didn't know the breed of dog they had, right? If they had one, and the names of their kids, right? It's just inevitable then that there is a scale of which that can't sustain. And yet, if you get the culture right on growth, as far as not something I've had to experience, but from what I've heard from you and others, is that you're then in a situation where you can try to mitigate that, and that stops people feeling then that they are just a cog in a machine, of which then becomes faceless and nameless and identityless, and that then stops them making the same risk to patients that they care for. And so that is where very few have done that. And so what do you think are the key mitigating factors then culturally? How did you harness that? Because you said that became a focus as you were deputy CEO. You really were able to lean into that. So talk me through some of those strategies.
It was so I guess an awareness that happy staff equals happy patients. So just being mindful that we're with staff, with clinicians, we're dealing with people. And just being mindful of if your staff are happy, then they're going to give a good personalised treatment to patients, and the patients are going to be happy. So look, I think some of the tenets of good culture is just making sure you've got an overriding purpose or mission, and just continually being clear about that and repeating it. I think harking back to when I first physio found me, or I found physio, the reason I got into it was to, in short, to make people better. And that thread continued from, me practicing as a physio to going to partnership, to a startup, to a medium-sized business. That thread of just being clear, that's what we're here for every day.
Gotcha.
And that, and making sure that everyone's clear that that's what we're here for, and what we're trying to deliver, improving people's lives.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it makes sense as well that would translate across different elements of what you did. And I think one of the things as well is I come to this knowing really strongly of some of your story, but particularly of your businesses and brands. But it's also, there's enough geography between me and you, and also for where I've ended up working or ever done business, really, for me to not know, for better or worse, the clinical products and services you deliver. Now, for sustainability, you can make plenty of assumption over their quality, but it's just that my question's definitely based on this sort of what must be almost an inevitable challenge of growth that very few people manage to thrive off. And so as a person, it's really interesting that there's these little momentary, I won't say pauses, but there's these almost transition periods for you as a person and as the business adapts for it to become reconciled. And I think that it's one of the things that frustrates me is when people speak with some naivety, as if that is just a one-way escalator. And it's just that it almost comes with its intervals, from what I observe.
Yeah, and so look, a danger is that you're right, that you can have this sort of, you can know everyone within an organization, and you can keep that good culture, but you're right, what happens when it grows beyond that? And I guess the second pillar, first one's having an overriding mission. Second one, make sure you've got engaging leaders. Do you know what I mean? So I mightn't be able to have all those conversations directly with someone, but the people who are having those conversations with the clinicians and non-clinicians on the ground, they need to be good leaders, who listen, who talk, who see the person as a human being, not as a robot.
Right.
So part of making sure you don't lose that caring culture is making sure you're the tier of leaders, you're creating good leaders that are good with people, that are getting people on board and encouraging them to follow the mission. So I couldn't be having conversations with every single staff member, but I need to make sure that the leaders and managers who are having those conversations, understand that this is how we roll. And as you disseminate stuff down, it's up to them to be doing that. And you're supposed to be modeling, right behaviors and doing that sort of thing. So I think it is hard to roll out good cultures as a business grows and gets bigger. But I think if you think about making sure, the people underneath you and the people underneath them and the people underneath them, and it just sort of disseminates down, that's how you get that culture sort of rolling out. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. I've had lots of different people, both on and off air, recently crying for help about the challenges of recruitment. But I know that at the level that you're talking about, so because sometimes the market forces that exist around, whether it's a buyer or seller's market for labour, is an interesting one, particularly at that clinical level or sort of clinical leadership level. But when it comes to the description that you're talking about, which is definitely corporate leadership as well, that is a famously dark art in a way, right? Because it's not the sort of thing that can be found from the corners of a CV. It's a real fitting the right jigsaw into the right puzzle. How have you found recruiting at that level, and how much have you grown your own? How much have you brought them in? Is there a percentage you can think of as to what that ratio looks like again?
So Vita Health Group, like all physio providers, like healthcare providers, recruitment has been a challenge, and I think it's changing and evolving, and there are various strategies ongoing. Just growing our own and bringing people through, and incentive schemes to bring in your colleagues and your friends and all that sort of stuff. So all that's, there is a HR strategy in terms of recruitment, but I guess one thread through it all is that word of mouth is important, and being known as a good employer is a really good thing to be known out in the market. If recruitment hard, which it has been for quite a while now, and so when someone asks about, look, there's a job going here, what do you think? And the physio community is relatively, there's not many 2 degrees of separation. There's probably only 2 or 3 degrees of separation when people. It's important that people who work for you have a good experience, and then talk to their network or professional colleagues, that's one of the best referrals you can have. If someone who currently works for you says, yeah, they're a good mob, come in and work. So again, just underlines having a good culture, fixes a lot of things, and it certainly makes the recruitment challenges easier.
Yeah, not an easy. It's funny, isn't it, when it's certainly an easier thing to get right first time than to try and retrofit or to try and drain a swamp, for want of a better phrase. What about at that board level then, or sort of sub-exec level of elite managers that don't necessarily some might need clinical insight, but what I'm meaning is the trust, transparency, the ways in which they would disseminate culture and vision. That is a real art form in and of itself across any enterprise, especially of that size. How have you found that? And have you found that some of the things you've just described in terms of clinical recruitment apply cleanly, or are there other layers to it?
Yeah, just I mean on that next level down. I mean, how do you get them disseminating the culture? I've read somewhere that a company's culture is usually set with the first 12 employees, and then it's just set, and then it just sort of goes from there, which I think is interesting. It's almost like where the arrow's pointing, and then it flows from there. But I think it's a combination of things. So when employing managers and that sort of thing, you're asking, you're trying to assess what their leadership capabilities are, but not only that, do you have aligned values? Will they fit in with the culture that you're trying to roll out? So it comes down to, I guess, recruiting the right people who are aligned culturally and with values. And I guess it's just taking the time to ride alongside them and just making sure they are living the values that you're hoping for them to model to the people that they're managing. Does that answer your question, Jack? Or
no, it does. No, it does. It's one of them things where I suppose, and a sort of sidebar to that is, have you found yourself in the main as a company, not just you as a person, but have you really grown your own leaders, or have you brought them in? Is there a ratio between those two sort of elements at that level?
So I'd say in the early days we more so grew our own, but as we've got bigger, then and also private equity backed, where you haven't got as much time. They're on a fixed time period. There isn't as much time to grow your own. So there is an element of bringing people in, and I think that you find in healthcare, it's a relatively small pool that we're swimming in, right. And there are people in healthcare who've been working at companies like Bupa and Nuffield and HCA who, I guess, have already got some leadership runs on the belt and have run big departments or sections or services, and so I would say that as we've gone from a medium size to a enterprise corporate size organisation, there's been more of bringing in people who played at that level. And that means they can get down to stuff quicker. Yeah. They still have to fit in with the culture and get up to speed with that. But I would say that the balance tilts towards bringing in people who've been there and done it, rather than having the time to grow them and nurture them.
Yeah, no, that's
you do. But again, it's like I was saying before. It depends what growth trajectory you want. If you're happy with an organic growth, you grow people yourself. But if you want a higher growth curve, then you haven't got time for that. You bring people in who've been there and done it.
Someone that's seen it before. Yeah, I think I really do understand that, and I can understand those time pressures. I think one of the, especially as I speak to a sort of fellow founder rather than someone that's very interesting conversations with exec directors of all different persuasions and stuff. But to some extent, I think the reason I'm framing it as I am with you is because in some ways there are some mercenaries that could talk a good game about the culture being a good fit for them, but fundamentally and by the way, they're very good mercenaries. They're doing important work. I'm not trying to downplay it necessarily, but compared to someone that you have been able to grow, that's come through, that's understood it, that is then has done the job of which they're instructing, and the one beneath that, there is something about that. Now, it is slower, absolutely it is, but it is also a more obvious way of transferring culture throughout and creating that transparency, as well as creating that obvious upward aspiration. So again, especially because of this sort of stage I'm at my career and the sizes of my businesses, I am not for a second speaking from experience. So it could be that I'm overindulging a cliche, but is there at all that risk that you do have on say a board level or an associate director level, that by those that have that experience elsewhere, they made those pleasant noises in somewhere else that might have a slightly different cultural reputation or whatever, and that fundamentally they might be very good at making that work operationally, but if indeed I am speaking to something that might exist but only in a small part of it, how might that be mitigated if it exists at all?
I think so. You said, can sympathise as a founder. I remember reading about there's some sort. It's called founders fallacy or something like that, where you start a business, you're used to solving problems yourself, you're used to people looking to you to solve the problems, and you start to get in your head that actually I'm good at solving problems.
I'm the problem solver, not a problem
I know
solver.
best.
Yeah, no, I get that.
And so I was aware, you get used to the point, and when work stops, I come in and start thinking, start telling my wife and kids I know best, and I get pulled up in short term that I don't. So there are knowledge gaps, and whilst I knew bits about various the various departments of the business, I wasn't I was a generalist. I wasn't a knowledge subject matter expert in those, and so you can get people from other organisations coming in who, their area of expertise was HR, for example, so they know all about recruitment strategies that I didn't have knowledge of. They know about how to utilise recruiting strategies, and we need a certain sort of leader. How do we get them? How do we get to them? So these subject matter experts fill in the gaps that you don't have as a founder, and give you a deeper resource of strategies to deploy in your business. You bring them in, and to a certain extent that they can be a bit mercenary, like that. Like there are people, they're career leaders, and they move around the various organisations, basically moving from one to the next. But I guess that's the job of the organisation, is to bring them in, see what capabilities and what they can contribute, and get them into the culture of the business so they'll stay and keep delivering. Or if they're not a fit, then maybe it's time to shake hands and to move somewhere else.
Do you think I might be, because it's very theoretical for me, do you think I might be overplaying that fear or that risk?
That what people will come in and be mercenaries, or
because it's a funny word, isn't it? Because it's certainly not meant as a slur, but it's just that that I think that in theory, I'm admitting that I could so imagine a circumstance where, because of the time pressures existing, particularly under say VC-backed growth, you could imagine a problem where, given a bit more time, you might have at least had a ratio that suited, where you had some of your exec or sub-exec leaders that had really emerged through, that then incoming would be less mercenary-like almost automatically, because they'd need to comply. I suppose I might be overly maybe I'm being too theoretic, whereas you've lived it.
You're right. So a founder and the first few employees are in that, even a small group, you can get to a point where people will, in inverted commas, almost lay down their lives for an organisation. They're committed. And there is something about when you get bigger and you bring in specialists. You could argue that there isn't that initial commitment that you'd have with in a smaller organisation. And I think there is statistics that show that staff engagement is higher and better in smaller organisations than larger organisations. So definitely, but I still think you can get that engagement. It isn't a reason not to bring people in.
Sure.
They won't. You could argue they won't be as committed and engaged, but you can still get them pretty committed and engaged where you can achieve the objectives. So
because I don't want to make that's the thing, is it's easy to be cynical about something you either don't understand or haven't experienced, and therefore I don't want to be that guy. But then similarly, I can observe how things might fall out, or the sort of real obvious downsides of a narrow sense of careerism that doesn't really care about the identity of which someone's in. In healthcare, we'd particularly want to insulate ourselves. That matter. It just matters less in financial institutions, for example, right? It just kind of does, because those things, the hair's breadth between two banks matters less culturally compared to some of the healthcare provision that we need to be trying to aspire to. That the devil is in the detail there.
I guess I'm an optimist. Most people want to do the right thing and want to be part of something that's doing good. I think you can bring people in, and generally they want to do a good job and they want to contribute to the greater good. I guess occasionally there's bad apples where it's more mercenary and that sort of thing. But in general, I think there is an intent there that people want to contribute the best they can.
I think in the spirit of my question as well, I think I know that there is a percentage of mercenary of which you should and can carry, and it is sensible to, especially if they're very competent and they can move through and they can do some good work. I think it's just trying to work out what that percentage is. I've realised that time's got away from me a little bit, Stuart. Do you have another 10 minutes or so? Is that?
Yes, I can. Yes, Jack.
Is that doable? Yeah,
yes.
And then I'll bring it home. Sorry, I didn't realise how much it had flown by. Now, what I wanted to make sure we drove to is I just want to finish the timeline if we can, because we got to very close to now, didn't we? I think. And so Vita's growth through and beyond the pandemic. So tell us about recent turn of events, and then we'll I'm going to get your prognostications as well.
So mate, just to cut a long story short, so I went from being deputy CEO. I was starting to approach my mid-50s. I wanted to run slower. I'd been doing 60, 70-hour weeks for a long time, 20 odd years. So I moved to a position on the board. So I was basically a NED and a non-executive director. And just recently, the organisation has been purchased by another acquirer, Spire Healthcare Group. And for me, that was an opportunity to step off the bus completely, both as an employee and shareholder. So now I'm newly unemployed. I'm hoping, let me know if you've got any jobs up there, Jack. But I've almost just come out the other side, after a 25-year journey, which was, as I said, went from 2 to 2000. And I'm just trying to work out what the next chapter might hold.
Brilliant. Well, we can definitely talk about that. I've got a set of Choose Health tracksuit bottoms with your name on them if you fancy, mate. And get right back in at the grassroots again if
awesome.
you like. But that's one of the reasons why, obviously, as I said, the timing for us to tell your story in its fullest as best we can is so interesting, because that has been obviously another sort of landmark. Do you when it's something like Spire, that is very much an acquisition, whereas when you guys created Vita, that would be considered a merger of corporate equals in a sense.
Mate, it's early days. I think Spire is a good home. They're looking to move from being a hospital group to a healthcare provider, so they're looking to diversify, which I think is a sensible thing in any business. They're not doing much of the mental health. They're already doing MSK. They are looking for more primary care type services. So look, I think it's a good home. I think again it will allow more infrastructure and support networks to allow future growth. So yeah, and I think they've got a similar culture. You look at their mission and what they're trying to achieve. They're trying to have a positive impact on people's lives. So yeah, when you're required by someone, I think one of the biggest risks is having different cultures, and when you're being acquired or merging or whatever, it's making sure the cultures are aligned is one of the most, if not the most important thing. So yeah, it looks like that's the case here. But
do you think that the timing was that, because the like you said, timing can be everything and stuff, but is it something that an obvious sort of change of pace and makes total sense for you? Is where's your relationship with the R word of retirement then now? Is that something that naturally then are you wanting to try and take a couple of steps and then that, or is it semi-retirement? Where do you intend to
go? Don't like the word retirement. That sounds like I've got nothing else to do except put the slippers on. No, look. There's plenty of things that projects, things I want to be involved with. So right. I'm not ready to move to a full-on operational role like I did do for a while. Certainly, I want to be spending more time at home. My kids will be out of the house, in a couple of years. So I want to grab the last couple of years of that. But I'm trying different things. So I'm helping out. I'm doing a little bit of business mentoring for other healthcare businesses. Right. If I can help show the path and avoid some of the potholes that I went down, then I want to share that knowledge. And I'm trying a couple of charity roles as well, just boards and that sort of thing. So yeah, just putting my toe in the water, a couple of interesting projects. And yeah, one that you might be interested in is one called Lahara, which is a charity in Nepal, where we're training local Nepalese up how to do sports massage and open up their own clinics. So they're basically massaging people on the way up to Everest Base Camp. So that's something that rose my boat of making people better, but also teaching the locals a skill and having benefit for the community and is sustainable, and we can step away. So yeah, just doing some interesting things like that where I can utilize what I've learned through my career journey and put it to good use somewhere else.
Well, there's a few different reasons as to why I hoped you'd say that. But one of them for this conversation, and just to see this home, is I really wanted to make sure we finished with, based on said experience and your continued application of that across different domains, I just wondered if I could get your take on the MSK industry at large, let's say, or if you want to, the physiotherapy profession nested within it. And I don't really mind whether that be you've got a certain hot take on clinical practice, operations, management, policy, you name it. But I just wondered if you had to try and get your sort of Stu's take on what needs to be, or what is currently and what needs to be that difference, changes in direction, or things that you want to support. What's your hot take on the now?
Matt, I'll try and limit it to three. I mean, one is, look, I think getting back to my bugbear of NHS private, mate, again, it would be good if there's continued acceptance that having a balance of both is, as long as it's a good service. So as long as there's continued acceptance and support of both, as long as it's good physio, that would be something that I would hope we continue. Second one would be, probably. I think the physio profession is good at our clinical bit and what we do. Perhaps areas that we could be better at is the leadership bit and the commercial bit. We need to stand up and stand up for ourselves a bit more. We need to understand it isn't just about the clinical stuff. It's also, it has to make sense. It has to be efficient. It has to be effective. It has to be paid for. I guess a bit, getting a bit more business commercially aware, I think will benefit the profession.
Do you think that do we fail to foster entrepreneurship? Do you think, or commercial wisdom, shall we say? Call it what you want.
I'd almost say, in the past, I'd probably say there's a little bit of looking down on it. There's a little bit of you're just out for profits and bugger the people. Where I don't think it is like that. It can be if it goes too far, but I think it's better. I think it's getting better. I've certainly seen the CSP implement the leadership program that it's done for probably 4 or 5 years now, and it's producing those leaders that you need to push forward the profession. So look, I think, again, I'm an optimist. I think it's getting better. But it would be good to continue on that route, that we continue to foster just not clinical skills, but leadership skills, business skills.
Sure.
And I guess thirdly is, we shouldn't feel bad about shouting what we do. I sometimes feel we don't shout loudly enough around the bit we play in the healthcare economy, and doctors and nurses seem to get a lot of the airplay. We provide a great service in rehabilitating people and keeping people out of hospital. I'd like us to have a more structured approach to getting the word out there and growing the profession and having a greater impact. So they're in a nutshell, Jack, they're probably the 3 things that I would say that it'd be good to focus on in the future.
No, that sounds music to my ears. Obviously, something that we want to try and make sure we promote and exemplify where possible. It's been a really, I pinch myself a lot of the time, really having the opportunity to chat to various different clinical experts, business experts, but those especially that have been on journeys like yours, that have done the doing and can give us that insight. And you've been really generous both with your time and insights today. So where do people find out a little more about you, or could get in touch with you, particularly if they feel that there are projects they'd like to put under your nose?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Stuart Patterson with 1 T. And basically find us on LinkedIn might be the easiest thing. That would be the best way to get in contact. My email address is stuart.patterson2257@gmail.com. Just through those channels, Jack, I think would be the easiest ways.
That's superb. Well, obviously, people can feel free to get in touch with us, and we can direct you Stu's way. Thank you again for your time. Really appreciate it. It's something I've been meaning to do for a while. We bumped into each other in London a couple of months ago, and I'm pleased to have got you on the hook for this, because it's been a really interesting insight into something that very few have experienced quite to the same rate and scale as you have, and it is very inspirational for me and many others.
My pleasure, Jack. Thanks for having us on. And make sure you've got those tracksuit pants, okay? Extra large, be good.
Hey, mate, I'll get it. I've got them ironed and pressed, ready for you. I'll get you the patients ready. So yeah, thanks again. Speak soon.
Cheers, Jack. Bye.
Cheers, too.
Here at Physio Matters, we think physio matters. Become a member today and access over 500 webinars, get free tickets to shows, and access new content instantly. Access at home, work, or on the train to make sure your CPD is on track. Physio-matters.com. More content than the all-you-can-eat buffet cart.